Okay, I think I'm ready to start streaming here. So, just a little bit of a backstory. Like, I'm not gonna waste your time here, okay? I was gonna stream on the weekend, but I didn't because I did a bunch of busy work setting up all these MIDI files for this little project I'm working on. What does that mean? You don't need to worry about it. Forget about it. Forget I said anything. Instead of doing music today, what I'm gonna do is actually play around with Blender. So as you can see, sorry, just give me a sec. As you can see here, oh, as you cannot see, okay, there we go. So as you can see, I am taking a, like, for those of you that don't know, if you've just tuned in, you have no idea what this is. I'm making these Megaman levels, like the classic series, right? I'm making Cutman, yeah, this is Cutman's level. So what I'm doing is I'm remaking Cutman's level in 3D, as you can see here. Kind of cool, hey? But yeah, you're not going to hear a lot from me because actually what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to turn off my brain, listen to some SCP stories by, what's his name? The Exploring series. And again, I would highly recommend listening to his channel if you want to get into the series because he takes a more professional approach to it. Nothing against the animation channels, but he does it better. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to mute myself. Yeah, I'm not muted. I'm going to mute myself, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. It should pop up on my stream, and if it doesn't, then I don't know. Just sit there and be patient. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now and just yeah. If you have any questions, go ahead ask me and just enjoy the stream. This should be fairly laid back, so you shouldn't expect me to talk a whole lot unless unless someone's asking questions. So yeah, okay, there we go. Let's begin this. Let's do it. Oh, and one last thing, like this might be a weird SCP for you to listen to, but like I love this sarcasm stuff, so it might be a little strange, but don't worry about it. I mean, it grows on you, pun intended. Okay, let's start.
Sarcasm. The nature of belief and faith is certainly a powerful one, regardless of the concept of a deity or deities. But even just looking at the power, control, and influence that believers can possess, from the widespread influence of the Vatican to the utter control of a small cult leader, faith has been a prominent aspect of our species for thousands of years. We've already looked at one religion in the SCP universe, the Church of the Broken God, but now we'll discuss their counterpart, the Sarkic cults. Sarcasm is another very large topic within the SCP universe, and this would be a very long video if I tried to cover it all. So let's just try and get a good idea of what Sarcasm is and why it has its followers. Sark means flesh in ancient Greek, which summarizes the overall belief system of the Sarkites, which is diametrically opposed to the Church of the Broken Gods theology based on technology. In fact, most Sarkites don't actually refer to themselves using the term Sarkic, as the term was an insult created by the Church of the Broken Gods' predecessors. That is not to overemphasize the Sarkites' opinion of the Church, as it is believed that while the Church views the Sarkites as a sort of biblical foe, the Sarkites seem to view the Church as simply another obstacle. The Sarkic cults are generally divided into two different factions that operate in vastly different ways, but follow mostly the same set of beliefs. The Proto-Sarkic cults are those found in small, isolated communities across Europe and Asia. These communities are usually poor, superstitious, technophobic, and generally hostile to any outsiders. The Neo-Sarkic cults, on the other hand, are found in much more urban environments and can be difficult to differentiate from other wealthy city dwellers. They are usually upper class, coming from affluent families, and with no apparent objections to technology and modern life. Both cults, however, believe that one of the main concepts of Sarcasm is that one can achieve apotheosis, that is, becoming a god. It's generally accepted that Grand Karcist Eon, the founder and prophet of the Sarkic cults, did become a god through some sort of interaction with the primordial goddess, Yaldabaoth. Proto-Sarkites believe that in time, Eon will eventually provide them with godhood, and Neo-Sarkites believe that it must be obtained through willpower, and they must one day usurp Eon. This will-to-power concept is prevalent in Neo-Sarkites, and a common proverb says to do as you will to whom you will, as desire is the measure of all things. Both cults believe in the idea of sacrifice, but here they differ greatly, as Proto-Sarkites believe in the sacrifice of oneself for the benefit of the many, and Neo-Sarkites instead believe in the sacrifice of the many for the benefit of oneself. Either way, belief in cycles of destruction and regeneration is paramount to the Sarkic faith. Both cults often practice ritual cannibalism, human sacrifice, the worship and spread of contagions, and bodily augmentation. Grand Karcist Eon founded the Sarkic cults nearly 4,000 years ago, somewhere in western Siberia. The Sarkic timeline is muddy, even their recent history, but it's believed that Eon was born to a Davite mother and a slave father, as the Davites referred to him as a half-breed. Eon was a slave for much of his youth in the city-state of Adatum.
I really don't mean to interrupt this because I myself am getting into it, but just a word of wisdom. If you see these strange comments, like this weird website link, pretty much safe to just ignore it. So yeah, just do not click those links. They're most likely bots, and if it is someone doing that, then you got to do something better with your time. But yeah, back to the thing. Just don't click them. Ignore them.
Possibly serving under an alchemist or priestess, until he led a slave revolt against the Davites. During this time, Eon demonstrated great power over organic flesh, both his own and others. Examples of this include transforming his hand into some sort of wolf jaw, capable of ripping through a metal jail cell, forcing others to act against their will, such as causing men to throw themselves on their spears, and could also gift these powers and other physical augmentations onto his followers. During this revolt, Eon was aided by 4 disciples, known as the Clavigar in the Sarkic faith, who would go on to be essentially saints. It's unclear how exactly Eon gained his abilities, but it somehow involves Yaldabaoth, a god or goddess believed by the Sarkites to be responsible for creating the universe, possibly through the process of giving birth to other gods, and then devouring them and exhaling the remains. Neo-Sarkites revere this god, but Proto-Sarkites seem to regard it as the enemy of all living things. Yaldabaoth is also joined by 6 other entities, known as Archons, which are described as manifestations of primordial chaos. It's said that Eon endured 6 trials given by the Archons, which allowed him to break free from the bondage of mortal limitations. In one text, Eon claims to have murdered Death herself and read the entrails of the Creator. Regardless of how Eon managed to become godlike, his slave revolt conquered the Davites, forcing them to recede, and the Sarkites built a number of cities, largely composed of organic material. The Sarkic civilization experienced its golden age and spread across Eurasia, with their capital being the converted kingdom of Adatum. Their civilization eventually spread into the Mediterranean, establishing a foothold here and colonizing the various islands. It was here where they would encounter the real resistance, however, as the Mechanites, the precursors to the Church of the Broken God, would rise up against them alongside other civilizations. This massive war involved anomalous technology, huge colossi, monstrous abominations, and 20 to 30 million casualties. The war ended with really no winners, as the Sarkic Empire broke apart and went into hiding, leading to a division in culture and theology. The Mechanites dwindled and eventually became the Church of the Broken God, and the devastation led to the collapse of the Bronze Age. Sarkicism would continue to live on in small communities throughout Eurasia, and their belief systems would slowly differ. At this point, it's completely unknown what happened to Grand Karcist Eon, and the Foundation is currently not even sure if he ever existed at all. Eventually, certain Sarkites would become intertwined with some noble courts, acting as advisors or court magicians, teaching the lords and ladies about alchemy, astrology, and the occult, while spreading belief in Sarkicism. These courts would become Sarkic great houses, practitioners of Neo-Sarkicism that follow their own interpretation of the religion. Both Proto-Sarkites and Neo-Sarkites would maintain their numbers through generations of inbreeding, avoiding genetic defects through Sarkic rituals, and Sarkites have shown vastly lower mortality rates compared to normal populations. Both groups also adhere to a strong belief in secrecy, whether through mistrust or necessity, and so Sarkicism is largely unknown to the wide world. So, most Sarkites present a dangerous threat to the current world order, as the Foundation considers their speculated goals to be fairly apocalyptic in nature, although not all Sarkites are dangerous, such as SCP-2815,
Hey,
a
Major
village
Nebula,
of
what's up?
inbreds that give out human flesh disguised as fruit.
Oh yeah, you're
For
the
some
guy
reason
that
it's
just,
safe to eat.
Sorry, it's kind of hard to
They
talk
also
over
donate
this. Just gonna
organs
lower the
and
volume
blood
a bit.
grown from a tree to local hospitals.
What's up, man? I mean, yeah, usually I would be working on music, but I don't know, I guess kind of burnt out on it, to be honest, so... Yeah, right now I'm just, the gist of what I'm doing is I take a Megaman stage, I put the background in, and block it out, and then I create, what do you call it, like a 3D model of that level, and I'm just gonna keep doing that because it's honestly a lot of fun. There's not a whole lot of thinking that goes into this, so, yeah, I'm pretty much gonna shut up and just keep working, but if you have questions, feel free to ask, man. I mean, I'll be here for a few hours, so... Yeah, with that being said, I'm gonna shut up and turn up the volume again.
But this is connected with another SCP located in Romania, SCP-2191. Here, a massive entity spread across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of tunnels, believed to be a concubine of Grand Karcist Eon. This entity is fed liquefied human remains, provided to it by a species of mutated vampiric humans. It's also appeased by locals who provide human sacrifices to minimize seismic activity. SCP-2133 is a proto-Sarkic commune in Russia, whose inhabitants are reincarnated whenever they die, possessing all of their past memories and appearance. They deposit their turnip harvests and any gangrenous limbs or tumorous growths in the church every evening, and the village is also filled with dark red tentacles that attack any outsiders entering the church. Beneath the church is an expansive series of tunnels and caverns, where there seems to be thousands of entities growing in eggs, as well as a temple devoted to a Karcist. There is possibly a strong connection between SCP-2133 and SCP-610, the flesh that hates. I've already made a video covering 610, which Sarkites refer to as the Red Death, and it's believed that this is the Sarkites' ultimate weapon in reshaping the world. Massive Sarkic organisms containing human DNA are believed to have battled the captured Colossus, SCP-2406, during the war between the Sarkites and the Mechanites. Another large organism was used as a Sarkic temple in their Golden Age, SCP-2095, but eventually was conquered during the war and died. SCP-2075 is a Karcist that was captured by the Foundation, but easily broke containment when it revealed that they had only captured one small aspect of itself, along with 2 of the security personnel assigned to the SCP. The doctor in charge was stabbed with an anomalous dagger, which seemed to transform him into a large amorphous mass of flesh and bone, which proceeded to kill 56 personnel before dying. Finally, there is SCP-2510, an important anomaly related to both the Church of the Broken God and the Sarkic cults. 2510 is a larger machine, and part of it has been made into a trans-dimensional gateway. The first people reported to have gone through the gateway, in 1940, were said to have found a machine city. The gateway destination can be controlled, and the Foundation sent a team to multiple dimensions, all variations of Earth. There's too much here to really go into detail, but to summarize, these dimensions were each one where the war between the Sarkic cults and the rest of humanity came to a climax. In one of them, parts of the broken god were fashioned into an unimaginable weapon that wiped out every trace of life from the planet. In others, the Sarkic forces went out, and Yaldabaoth broke free from its cage, driving the world to a horrific apocalypse. In another reality, however, humanity banded together and achieved a technological singularity, uniting to defeat the Sarkites. The lesson to be learned from this anomaly is that if humanity doesn't work together and embrace the Church of the Broken Gods ideology, the Sarkic cults will win. Since there's really no canon, however, this is just one perspective. So, this should have provided a good jumping off point to continue learning about Sarkicism as it's continually expanded. In the majority of cases, it's very easy to look at the Sarkic cults as nothing more than threats to humanity, and that seems to be the general consensus for most of the community. While some might boil down the conflict between the Broken God Church and the Sarkites to just good versus evil, good fiction is rarely as simple as that. Regardless, Sarkicism and its anomalies are a very interesting blend of religion, folklore, occultism, and body horror. The Chaos Insurgency. So far in this series, we've discussed inexplicable phenomena and the people that contain them, destroy them, worship them, and even sell them, but we haven't discussed many instances in which normal humans attempt to weaponize the anomalous. It's probably pretty clear at this point that if groups such as the SCP Foundation, the GOC, or even Marshall, Carter, and Dark wanted to use SCPs instead of containing, destroying, or selling them, the results could be pretty devastating. Well, of course, there is a group that wants to do exactly that, utilizing whatever anomalous items they can to achieve their goals, and they go by the name of the Chaos Insurgency. Like the rest of my summaries of different groups of interest, this video won't be completely comprehensive, but it should provide a good look at the insurgency. The Chaos Insurgency's history starts in 1924, when the O5 Council of the SCP Foundation formed an elite covert special task force comprised of agents known for their unflinching loyalty to the Council. The purpose of this task force, codenamed Insurgency, was to carry out certain missions that required ethically questionable methods and with politically unsavory results in secrecy in order to maintain the reputation of the Foundation. To further this objective, the Insurgency were branded as defectors from the Foundation, with only the Council knowing the truth as the task force carried out their wishes for 24 years. In 1948, however, the lie became reality, as the supposed defectors became actual defectors. The task force carried out multiple raids on Foundation facilities, stealing certain SCPs with high research and military potential, as well as transporting dozens of other defecting personnel with them. The task force caused severe casualties in the process, and the O5 Council had a new problem on their hands, with no clue as to what caused the loyal agents to betray them. So, why did the Insurgency betray the Foundation? And why do they continue to use SCPs? The lack of canon kicks in here, and so really the answer is unknown, but there are always theories. A basic theory is simple personal gain. greed, and the lust for power drew the group into utilizing powerful anomalies to kill, steal, and amass control. This theory at least fits in with the chaos portion of their name. If supernatural terrorist doesn't sit right with you, though, there is a theory that they actually wish to help humanity, but don't think the Foundation or the GOC are going about it the right way. To make a nerdy reference, much like Boromir wished to use the One Ring to save Gondor, the Insurgency could wish to use SCPs to save the world rather than destroying them or keeping them contained. Other theories claim that the Insurgency doesn't want anything for the world other than chaos. Whatever the case, the Chaos Insurgency, much like the rest of the groups of interest in the SCP universe, are shrouded in mystery. Let's look at a few SCPs then to learn more about how the Chaos Insurgency operates. SCP-884 is a small handheld mirror that, when used while shaving, causes the subject to fail to perceive the removal of hair, leading them to continue shaving an area over and over. 884 was in Foundation custody until an Insurgency defector working for the Foundation urged them to relocate the object to a safer location, which led to a raid by the Chaos Insurgency, resulting in the theft of 884. After the defector was executed, the Foundation led a number of raids on Chaos Insurgency storage locations, where they recovered 884 and found that the Insurgency had set up several extensive experiments related to it. Although the Foundation found the tests to be meaningless, the Insurgency attacked again, failing to steal 884, but the Foundation, curious as to why they would be so interested in such a benign SCP, continued experimenting on it. After 2 years of testing, we learned from an agent embedded in the Insurgency the real story. SCP-884's real effect involves infecting those who have been exposed to it with a symptom they call doubt. The effect takes years to develop, but individuals with the symptom begin doubting themselves and their actions, starting with just rechecking things such as locked doors, but eventually leads to a struggle to make simple choices, and eventually a failure to make decisions of any kind, easily leading to death. The Insurgency's plan then was simply to get the Foundation as interested as possible in 884, causing it to affect far more personnel than it normally would have. It's believed that thousands of Foundation personnel were infected by the object, far more than the Insurgency lost in the process. Essentially, the Foundation played themselves, and it shows that the Chaos Insurgency aren't a bumbling crew of inept fools. This, of course, wasn't the only time that the Insurgency utilized an anomalous object to trick the Foundation. SCP-1316 is a female house cat with the appearance of a 3-month-old kitten, despite being in Foundation custody since 1948, and so its anomalous property is that it doesn't age. This is what the Foundation believed until a raid by the Chaos Insurgency led to the theft, destruction, or disappearance of a number of SCPs. In the aftermath, the Foundation performed a routine scan for any bugs or hidden surveillance items in the site, discovering that SCP-1316 was regularly broadcasting a signal every day for 5 minutes. The signal consisted of an artificially generated female voice reading a series of numbers, and that transmission was able to be picked up by any standard shortwave radio. The Foundation quickly cracked the number code, deciphering messages transmitted by 1316. The day after the raid, it transmitted that the operation was successful and requested further orders or extraction. From then on, it transmitted that the Foundation was growing suspicious, confining it to a single room, and then moving it to a new site entirely. Finally, it transmitted that the Foundation knows about its true purpose, and it requested immediate extraction. 2 days later, with no response, it transmitted its last message saying, "There is no extraction, is there?" Since then, 1316 has not transmitted any more broadcasts, and so the Foundation keeps it confined and feeds it twice a day. Perhaps one of the most successful intrusions into the SCP Foundation by the Chaos Insurgency is SCP-1275, to the point of the Foundation is still not sure the Insurgency is behind it. 1275 is a fluid, amorphous entity capable of changing its volume, shape, color, and opacity. It can flatten and shrink itself to a small enough size to squeeze through even minor flaws in a seal thought to be airtight, and can grow large enough to envelop people or larger objects. If left alone, 1275 will seek out classified documents, SCPs, or Foundation personnel and envelop them. Once enveloped, 1275 will begin to rapidly decrease in size, and the enveloped object will disappear, apparently transporting it to an unknown location. Alternatively, 1275 is capable of disgorging foreign objects originating from an unknown location, including explosives, weaponry, anomalous objects, and hostile agents, in order to assist in breaching its containment. It's unclear if the object possesses its own intelligence and/or is being controlled by an outside force, but it is actively hostile to the Foundation and their operations. As of now, the object is contained in the Gobi Desert, in a tungsten cube filled with an electrified wire lattice and molten lead, and is under constant surveillance. 1275 is believed to be responsible for the disappearance of over 20 different SCPs across 10 different facilities over the course of 18 years, along with at least 49 personnel. As readers, we get the benefit of knowing the Chaos Insurgency is somehow responsible for controlling this entity, but the Foundation is still trying to figure that out. Most SCP reports that mention the Chaos Insurgency, however, only do so in passing. Objects are often recovered from raids on Insurgency storage locations or bases of operations, and occasionally the Insurgency will launch raids in return to steal SCPs. It's easy to assume that the Insurgency commits similar operations on other groups, like the GOC or Marshall Carter and Dark. There are plenty of different tales related to the Chaos Insurgency, some painting them as villains, others as rogue heroes, but the common theme is that they are a fly in the ointment. The Chaos Insurgency are blank enough that you can fill in the gaps in the motives yourself. Some discuss the rumors that the Insurgency use their power to take over small third world towns, and use the populations as fodder for experiments, like D-Class. Others say the Insurgency is actually guided by an anomalous power beyond our comprehension, and they alone can take steps to preserve humanity. I'm not here to say one is right and others are wrong, but like many aspects of the SCP universe, the stories are fluid. At the very least, though, the Chaos Insurgency are one of the few groups with the knowledge, capabilities, and willpower to use the anomalous to achieve their goals, whatever they may be. So, feel free to make up your own mind, and make sure your cat isn't working for the Insurgency. SCP-3001 Red Reality. What does it mean to be truly alone? You can be alone in a room, in a building, on an island, or on the moon, or you can be alone in your own mind. But we all live in a world filled with people. SCP-3001, on the other hand, shows us an example of an individual that is truly and utterly alone, which is a unique case of science fiction, and yet it also manages to be surprisingly grounded in reality. SCP-3001 is not a happy story, but it's also an incomplete one, which leaves us with a sense of hope. The bulk of 3001 takes the form of transcribed logs, so I would suggest reading through it all yourself, but I'll try to strike a balance between summarizing and reading them. To put it simply, SCP-3001 is a non-dimension, accessible through the creation of a specific type of flawed wormhole. Basically, it is a space between dimensions that really shouldn't exist, but was discovered by the SCP Foundation accidentally. It is believed to extend infinitely in all directions, but possesses no matter of any kind. The non-dimension also has an extremely low Hume level, which is a degree of measurement used by the Foundation to measure the strength or amount of reality in a given area. In other words, our baseline reality has a given level of Hume that we're accustomed to, but certain factors, such as other dimensions or reality benders, can change that level of Hume as things become more or less real, so to speak. What a very low Hume level means for 3001 is that matter that would be located inside the non-dimension decays at an extremely slow rate, and organisms could still function despite taking damage that would normally kill them, up to a certain point. The downside of this, however, is that Hume fields tend to even out, and so prolonged exposure to 3001 will cause an organism's Hume level to drop until they begin to disintegrate. 3001 was discovered in 2000, while Dr. Robert Scranton and his wife, Dr. Anna Lang, were working on a device that would stabilize reality by manipulating Hume levels. Unexpected seismic activity at the site damaged several experimental reality stabilizers, creating one of those specific wormholes, which proceeded to pull Robert into the non-dimension before closing. We are then presented with a large number of logs, transcribed from audio recordings made by Robert. For the first 8 days of Robert being inside 3001, he attempts to navigate the non-dimension to find a way out while going through periods of panic, confusion, and anger. He eventually makes his way over to a control panel that had gone through the wormhole with him, although he doesn't realize at first that it is actively recording. He makes several recordings, presumably for his own benefit, as he states his name and date of birth, mentions his favorite color is blue, and his favorite song is Living on a Prayer, and that he loves his wife, Anna. Before long, he notices a flashing light on the control panel, and realizes that the machine is working and recording. He panics and states his name again, asking if anyone can hear him, saying he doesn't know where he is. He's not sure at all how the machine is working, but he's pretty sure that no one can hear him. He also notes how hungry and thirsty he is, saying that he should have died of dehydration by now, an effect of the low Hume level, although it will take Robert some time to realize this. After fiddling with the machine some more, he locates the controls, causing the machine to speak, telling him he's been here for 2 weeks, 3 days, 7 hours, and 58 minutes. Another week goes by, with Robert realizing now that it doesn't seem like he'll die here due to hunger or thirst, and he wonders if by some miracle he'll find his way out of here. 5 weeks go by with Robert barely recording anything, but he comes back and says that he's been trying to learn about this place he's in, referring to it as his prison and his kingdom. He manages to maintain his professionalism, recording a log saying that he's going to document this place as an SCP to maybe help someone else in the future that gets stuck in here. A few days later, he records a log as if it were a standard SCP document about the non-dimension, but we can see the cracks in his mental state beginning to show. The only light source in the entire non-dimension is a small red light on the control panel, so he's been using that as a marker for his explorations. He also notes that he's felt an itch or a tingle across his head recently, but only if he concentrates on it. He next realizes that although he's thought he's been walking on flat ground this whole time, there really shouldn't be anything to walk on in this place, and now he notes that it's felt more like he's been swimming through something that's been applying pressure, like a thick black gel. He now realizes that by concentrating, he can actually move vertically as well as horizontally, again using the red light as his reference point, or as he calls it, Little Red. He understands a bit more about the location he's in now, knowing that it was caused by a problem with the reality stabilizer. He does some math, and apparently figures out how low the Hume level of this non-dimension is, but is not sure of the effects of that, as he's mostly worked with above average Hume levels. At this point, he really begins talking to the red light directly, as if it were a person. He seems to be speaking to it and imagines responses coming back from it, but this is pretty understandable given the situation. Robert's scientific mind allows him to keep focus, however, as he continues to perform calculations to help him understand 3001. He learns that the reality stabilizer that sent him and the control panel here cranked up their Hume levels to a few times normal level, meaning that it will take longer for them to equalize with 3001 and disintegrate. By his calculations, he has about 3 years or so before he's gone, and he believes he'll have something figured out by then. The tingling feeling he's had is his Hume level starting to diffuse. Robert's next log reads, "Hey Red, I'm gonna have to go for a bit. I want to test something, and you can't come with me. I'm sorry. No, Red, I'm really, really sorry. I want you to come, I do, but if we're together, the diffusion will increase faster. We both need as much time as possible. I need to figure this place out more, and you need to make sure you keep all that info in your head. Red, come on. You'll be fine, Red. I know you will. You're tough. A lot tougher than me. It'll only be for a bit, Red, but I need to see if I can find a way to keep us alive a bit longer. Maybe even get us out of here. If I can contain enough field, I can maybe even get us out. No, I'm not sure, but I need to find out. Red, we're talking about possibly escaping, okay? Yeah, it's a gap. A gap should have an end, like the walls of a canyon, understand? I need to find a wall, and then I can... I'm sorry, Red. I hope we're still friends when I come back. I'm going now. I'll see you soon." The control panel didn't record anything for nearly 4 full months, when suddenly Robert returned, far less hopeful than when he left. He says that this place is hell, and it goes on forever. He traveled in a single direction for 2 months before turning around. He then wonders if he let himself fall down long enough, would he eventually hit a bottom? More than 4 months go by before Robert returns again, saying there is no bottom either. This is the point where Robert's mental state really begins to deteriorate, as he asks Red if he's ever been married, or had kids, begging Red to talk to him. He suddenly realizes that his picture of Anna is fading due to the Hume levels, and he panics, begging Anna not to go, and asking Red to go get help. Robert loses coherency at this point, as months go by with him only sobbing, screaming, and mumbling. It has now been roughly 2 years and 9 months since Robert entered SCP-3001. Robert finally manages to return and make another recording, although his voice is now distorted due to both his own and the control panel's Hume levels dropping. He says that he can't feel his legs anymore, and he's not even sure if he's real anymore, but he knows he doesn't want to die yet. He says he went in a straight diagonal line for 6 months, and fell down for 8 months, but still found no end. He tells Red that he and Anna were planning to name their kid Lucy. His hand begins to break apart, resembling a spider web, but he still retains his knowledge of science, continuing to do calculations on 3001. Unfortunately, his body is beginning to seriously disintegrate, as he claims his hands are moving through each other, and he pulls his thumb off. He says he can go through himself, feeling both warm and cold, and also loses a kidney, but pleads to let him keep just his heart. 5 years have passed now, with Robert and the control panel still somehow held together, but finally the red light begins to fade. 9 months go by, and Red seems to make a return. Robert attempted to kill himself over 220 times, but none of them worked. He can't see his body due to the darkness, but speculates that he at least has 1 foot left, a few leg muscles, maybe a lung, and a heart. He claims that this non-dimension is now getting smaller, as there now seems to be a visible border that is getting brighter. The light from this border allows Robert to see himself, and he says there's so much gone, although the control panel seems to be far more solid than him. Robert claims that touching the panel hurts like hell, but he's surprisingly lucid now. He comes to a realization about the collapsing border, which is acting more like waves, and also begins to understand what we already know about 3001 being a non-dimension between 2 realities, saying that it's a dead end. Robert says that these waves are from a parallel reality, and they're pushing on him and Red, gradually creating a new wormhole. The only problem is, he's not sure what will happen when that wormhole is created. Robert's body continues to break down as blood leaks from him, and he finds himself constantly vomiting, despite not having eaten anything for years, nor having a stomach to hold anything. He says that he's not ready to go back yet, as he's pretty much a floating pile of organs kept functional by 3001. He has to stay away from the waves to prevent him from going through a wormhole and dying, but unfortunately the control panel will eventually go through. Robert says that he has 5 more years in 3001, during which he will slowly restabilize, giving him 5 years to figure out how to get out, but he'll have to stay in here without his metal companion. A humming pulse begins growing louder in the background, and Robert breaks down in hysterics again, becoming almost incomprehensible as he begs both Red and Anna for support, wanting to hold her hand, and telling her he lost his ring. 5 years, 11 months, and 21 days after an incident sent Dr. Robert Scranton into a non-dimension, the stabilizer control panel, thought lost, suddenly reappeared in the testing facility. Dr. Anna Lang, overseeing the testing, went to investigate the panel, horrified at finding it covered in blood, bile, viscera, and hair, identifying the hair color as belonging to Robert. A hand fell off of the panel, along with a wedding ring, and Anna accessed the first audio log, hearing her husband's voice for the first time in nearly 6 years. She proceeds to faint from shock. This is where the story of SCP-3001 leaves off, ultimately unfinished and leaving Robert's final fate to your imagination. According to the author, although much of Robert went back to our reality along with the control panel, there is still some of him in 3001, and it's quite possible he's still functional. Will he find a way to eventually return to reality and reunite with his wife? Or will he slowly go completely insane and disintegrate entirely? Those aren't the only options, as some tales have shown, but I think it's good a story like this is left so open to the reader. The concept of being isolated from all human contact is certainly not a new one in fiction, but it's rarely taken to this degree. Not only was Robert left stranded with only a machine to talk to, he was left in near total darkness and had no way of ending his life. Chances are we've all felt emotions of loneliness and isolation at one point or another, but at least we're not stuck in the red reality. SCP-2456 Dreams of a Broken World. We've talked about Fiftheism and the Fifth Church several times by this point, with each SCP related to the anomalous religion offering a considerable amount of weirdness, even by SCP standards. Since one of the main traits of Fiftheism seems to be its lack of a cohesive definition, this SCP doesn't strictly require any prior knowledge of other SCPs. However, I would personally recommend at least a passing familiarity with the group, and specifically knowledge of SCP-1425, Star Signals, which I have covered previously. SCP-2456 is a memetic parasite that is currently living in about 0.7% of the global population, meaning that around 54 million people across the planet have some sort of mental infection living in their minds. In its base form, this parasite is not contagious, and in fact, lies dormant most of the time. The presence of the parasite seems to affect these individuals in certain ways, however, as many of the infected share common traits. These traits include an affinity towards astrology, astronomy, and/or various pseudosciences, an increased proficiency in speaking foreign dialects, especially those in the Balto-Slavic and Afro-Asiatic regions, prolonged episodes of acute psychosis and paranoia, dissociative identity disorder, OCD, and a high attention span for geometrical shapes, patterns, and sequences of 5. Well, you already know this is a Fifthist SCP since I told you, but those are some big clues, as many of these are traits connected to Fiftheism in general, or more specifically, Ojai syndrome caused by SCP-1425. If an individual infected with SCP-2456 undergoes several stress triggers, the parasite will become active, causing the individual to suffer from something the Foundation refers to as an alpha event. The individual will fall into a period of advanced REM sleep, lasting up to 3 or 4 days, and after awaking, will claim to have had a series of vivid, cryptic dreams. The dreams always consist of visions of past prophets from various religions being executed with a sword, and various celestial bodies dancing in the sky. After awaking from these dreams, the parasite is vulnerable enough to be wiped out of a person's mind using amnestics. If not, however, the parasite will return to a state of dormancy, which lasts between 6 days to 6 years. After this period, the affected individual will begin preaching about a new religion, which always begins as an abstract, monotheistic variation of an existing religion. Godhead figures of this new religion are synonymous with the sun, and are believed to bring about a future apocalypse. There will also be mentions of a Gizmturperic Sea, which is not believed to exist, but the Foundation is looking into connections with another SCP. Much of the religion will contain references to celestial objects based on existing astronomical knowledge of the current time period. The preacher will also write down doctrine of this new religion, utilizing the number 5 frequently, and will draw numerous icons and symbols, often featuring the appearance of hands and regular quadrilaterals. The sun is also used often, with representations having limited forms of mathematical significance for some reason. This new religion is how the parasite spreads, although it's not knowledge of the religion that causes infection. You could read an entire summary of these various Fifthist religions and not be infected. Instead, it requires directly hearing about the religion from an infected individual, and you have to have strong religious beliefs to begin with. If someone does get infected by this process, they become something different than the original carrier of the parasite, referred to as a beta instance. Beta instances are typically violent and aggressive, prone to self-mutilation and warlike behavior, and will actively seek out uninfected to either spread the infection or to just murder them. It seems that the new religion also is capable of mildly warping reality around those it infects, growing in strength the more infected there are. We'll get to some specifics of that in a bit, but it varies quite a bit based on the nature of the new religion created. Those members of the population that are infected with a dormant parasite are immune to being infected by the anomalous religion, and may actually react aggressively if exposed to it. This will potentially act as a stress trigger, meaning that it's more likely that the parasite will become active. If two people with active parasites ever come into contact, meaning that they are each preaching about two different new anomalous religions, something very bad will end up happening. So far, throughout history, none of these anomalous religions have been successful in spreading to more than 5% of the global human population. Which is good, because the Foundation predicts that if that number ever hit 7%, it would be out of their control. For one reason, because there would be too many people actively working to spread it, and for another reason, because the reality warping effect would continue to grow massively in strength. Again, something very bad would occur if around 96% of the world population became infected, but by that point, I'm not sure how much it would bother us. The Foundation first learned of SCP-2456's existence during a raid on a base belonging to the Serpent's Hand in Oregon. While recovering some other SCPs, the MTF found a wooden crate next to a furnace with the words "Fifth Cycle of the Mind" stamped on its side. Inside were numerous Fifthist texts, manuscripts which detailed SCP-2456, and a note which read, "George, this is our latest catch. Please burn these as soon as you can at your discretion. Don't let the idiots find this." The Serpent's Hand doesn't often destroy SCPs, but they knew that this was a troublesome one, especially if it ended up in the wrong hands. The Foundation's, for example. Sadly, it seems George didn't quite get around to burning them. Let's look at a handful of previous anomalous religions created by SCP-2456 in the past. In 1837, a 2456 instance was activated in China, creating a religion called the God-Worshipping Society, an offshoot of both Confucianism and Catholicism. It surged in infection rate when the host of the infection formed the Taiping Army.
Again, I don't mean to interrupt, like I'm really into this right now, but if you see me like rapidly scrolling up and down, I'm not angry, I'm not upset, I'm just trying to fix my mouse. Like it gets caught when I try to zoom out, so yeah, just in case you were wondering. Anyway, back to the video.
In order to oppose the Chinese government. For reference sake, the God-Worshipping Society and the Taiping Army were both very real things. But it seems that, according to SCP-2456, the religious movement had Fifthist origins and reality-bending properties. The Taiping Rebellion eventually fell, and the God-Worshipping Society along with it, but it seems the reality-bending aspect of the religion caused a number of the infected to transform into piles of geological matter. While investigating the areas associated with the religion, the Foundation found human DNA bonded to rocks in the area. Moving over to Egypt, the cult of Aten was an anomalous religion that sprung out of the Egyptian mythos. The host of the religion is unknown, but it soon affected a pharaoh, Akhenaten of Amarna, who used his authority to condemn worship of all Egyptian deities, forcing his people to worship a sun god, Aten. Foundation archaeologists have found evidence in temples devoted to this religion that show aspects of self-mutilation, and sacrificial removal of the heart. The reality-bending effects of the cult of Aten seem to be related to shifts in both time and space. Occasionally, days would be stretched out to longer than normal, on one occasion with the midday sun not moving for 5 days, causing a drought and a peasant riot. Egyptian astronomical charts during this period show constellations, nebula, and star systems that are non-existent or in the wrong place. Additionally, an unknown planet was commonly shown in astronomical accounts, described as being half the size of Venus, but would pulse with light every 5 seconds. The name and host of the third religion is unknown, but seems to have widely influenced Aztec culture. It's believed that the well-known Aztec sun god, Tonatiuh, was created as an aspect of this anomalous religion, and managed to stick around in their culture and society despite the dying off of the religion that created it. It's also believed that the common practice of sacrificing hearts to Tonatiuh was started because of the Fifthist religion, and thus casualties linked to it could number over 56 million. It seems that although Tonatiuh is only one part of the anomalous religion, worship of this deity caused the spread of a mild reality-bending effect throughout the Aztec Empire. The sun and moon would occasionally be eclipsed by unknown celestial objects for weeks. Sacrificed cadavers would reanimate and attack the living, reaching into their throats to pull something out. And coastal regions would be greatly affected by a periodical glowing red poison. This poison would kill off the fish, and any humans exposed to it would suffer from tissue necrosis and large blood clots forming in their lungs. The next religion was found in France, started by Augustin Bon Joseph de Robespierre, called the Cult of the Supreme Being. This religion failed to spread far, partly due to the chaos of the French Revolution underway. Augustin's older brother, Maximilian, was infected, however, and was responsible for the Reign of Terror that saw mass executions in various French cities. There are accounts of incorporeal manifestations visible on the streets of Paris during this time, and sudden dimensional shifts in salons and smoking parlors around the city. I'll reiterate that all the names you've heard in this section were real people and religious movements, which is a nice touch. The log for the fifth anomalous religion is completely corrupted for some odd reason. Curious that it's the fifth one. The sixth one is mostly corrupted, but there are a few words that are legible. For one, the Rount scale of this one is 8, which is higher than any of the prior ones, and we're told that the Rount scale is a measure of the severity of an anomalous contagion outbreak, with 6 or higher being an epidemic. We also can read the words syndrome and protocol Ophiuch, and it ends with saying that the host of this religion is still at large. Those words connect this religion to SCP-1425, star signals, which spread the infections referred to as Ojai syndrome, and was combated by the Foundation through Protocol Ophiuchus. Seems that although the Foundation put a stop to the book, Star Signals, the root of the problem is still out there. In that fifthest crate that wasn't burned were some texts related to a few of these religions. The first was from the God-Worshipping Society in 1861, titled Wisdoms of the Heavenly King. The text speaks of a prophet standing on the edge of the heavens, speaking to the poor and weary below him as they grovel in the filth and ash of great mountains. They wept because they understood that they were standing so terribly close to the stars. Another section speaks of the prophet following the smoke until it turned to steam, then mist, then vapor. He then met a man from the west who lived in the south, and learned from him about the Great Dream. The man from the west left the great prophet, refusing to assist in the prophet's mission, but the prophet understood. The prophet then led his people out of the ashes and waged war, and they prevailed because the sun was on their side. The enemies that didn't flee were turned into ebony tar, black sand, and white salt. The final section of this text drops some more fifthist wisdom, including the suggestion to think 5 irrational thoughts a day, and the explanation that our world withers away 5 pieces at a time, but the stars will always die in 3s. A phrase similar to one spoken during the Star Signals debacle. Text from the Cult of Aten manuscript is practically indecipherable to our normal non-fifthist minds. It apparently is a previously undiscovered verse of the great hymn to the Aten, written by the pharaoh. It mentions the pharaoh's scribe, who is likely the original host of the religion, and mentions the mysterious pulsing planet, writing that it is Aten sending them visions from the heavens. It states that Aten perished among the harlots, whatever exactly that means, but he shall live on to indulge the next world with his divine antipathy. Finally, we have a diary written by Augustin Robespierre, who starts by writing about the Festival of Reason, a nationwide celebration initiated by the Cult of Reason to devalue Christianity in France. A week later, Augustin says that his brother Maximilian has voiced his concerns about the Cult of Reason, and that he had requested Augustin's presence in a salon, apparently one that the Foundation believes is linked to another SCP. His brother raged against the festival and the hypocrisy of the officials that organized it, but he didn't pay him much mind. The next diary entry shows that Augustin had a very vivid and peculiar dream, a sign that his 2456 parasite has activated. A week later, he now has a much clearer picture of a new religion, focused around a single deity that defies all odds and expectations and reconquers the world. He writes that a king must always exist in society, and this will be the one true king. Augustin sent a letter to his brother explaining the religion, later telling him in person, and now Maximilian was infected as well, leading to the formation of the Cult of the Supreme Being. Augustin writes about an occurrence in which he was reading a book of poetry on a bench when a headless man came up and asked him for a coin to pay the ferryman. Augustin didn't seem alarmed about this at all. He also writes about entering a strange salon where he encountered a 5-armed duke who ate some of Augustin's flesh. He goes on to write about how much blood is running through the streets, erupting from executed corpses like geysers. It seems that perhaps Augustin lost faith in the Cult of the Supreme Being, as he says that the promise of the Supreme Being allowing them to enter paradise is an empty promise from an empty Lord. He says that the world has been afflicted with madness, and says that he is guilty of giving his brother those inbred thoughts. He still retains belief in the existence of the Supreme Being, though, asking him to punish him. Let's put this all together, though, with the final addendum of SCP-2456, a transcript of an audio file that was sent to a Foundation researcher. The file was traced back to a terminal in a cubicle that had been vacant for 6 years. The terminal was found to be badly corroded, with traces of acid, sea brine, and burnt human tissue found in the CPU. The file was sent from someone that claims to have worked for the Foundation for the last 20 years, and who has experienced some pretty awful stuff in that time. We later learn that his name was John Richards. John says that he's dying, or more specifically, his soul is slowly burning away, and he's terrified. It seems that him, some other guys named Simon and Charlie, and someone else were assigned to SCP-2456 when it was first identified. Their job was to find past instances of the infection, and it seemed pretty easy at first. Unfortunately, the 4th person on their team, the unnamed man, suddenly dropped to the floor during lunch one day screaming about visions of the sea and the archons of a trilopic world. He stabbed a guard in the leg with a fork before being dragged to the infirmary, and an hour later, John went to the infirmary to check on him. To his bewilderment, the personnel there told him that no one had been admitted in the last 4 hours. John continues by explaining what exactly happened to that fourth man, which is also what happened to Simon and Charlie, and what is currently happening to him. He uses protein synthesis as a metaphor to explain the process involved with SCP-2456, but in an effort to emphasize clarity, I'll simplify it further. We know already that the mind parasite lives in certain people's brains and might eventually become active, causing them to spread knowledge about a new religion. These people are referred to as alpha instances by the Foundation. Those that hear about this new religion from this preacher become infected with a different type of infection and become beta instances. Beta instances can spread the infection the same way alpha instances can, but they are distinct entities. What John reveals then is that when a beta instance writes about the religion, a new infection is created, called a gamma instance. It's notable because the religion infection is spread specifically through hearing about it, not reading about it, whereas these gamma instances spread through written word. The gamma instances are also different because they are not memetic hazards, but rather anti-memetic hazards. It's not a guaranteed certainty, but whenever someone reads one of these gamma instances, there is a chance that they'll be infected with a powerful anti-meme, causing the person to slowly vanish from existence. Vanishing from existence is pretty terrifying, but since the Fifthis are involved, it's possible that the person is being sent somewhere, although where exactly is a pretty big question. In addition to the person being erased from our existence, all records and knowledge of the person will disappear alongside them. John and his team also learn that this process isn't always perfect, and oftentimes things will get left behind, such as a corpse or a name. The gamma infection will also cause vivid hallucinations and false memories in a person. They didn't know this at first, and at one point Simon simply disappeared, leaving his favorite coffee cup on the floor. John then discusses star signals, and ponders why the whole world didn't collapse when it spread across the United States. He speculates that the modern Fifth Church doesn't fully understand SCP-2456, and star signals was not a stable gamma instance. Instead of causing people to vanish from existence, it instead created new alpha instances, meaning new dormant parasites in people's minds. He realizes, though, that it must have worked a little bit, as the talk show host that was infected with Ojai syndrome vanished and never reappeared. John then devolves a bit into Fifthis rambling, as he too is infected. He says that SCP-2456 is the dream. The Fifth King has set his sights onto this world, and his unbridled anger will burn the earth with an undying flame. So on and so forth, a world bathed in blood, soul sacrifice, eternal nightmares. John dreams of terrible things, of the number 5 and the number 6, but rarely the number 4. He knows his time is almost up, but says that someone must have been working throughout all this time to keep the Fifth King and the Fifthis at bay. He wouldn't be surprised if the Serpent's Hand were involved. John Richards finishes by stating that once history is forgotten, it is of course doomed to repeat itself, and the sixth cycle will forevermore echo. The Foundation, of course, has no records of John or the other men mentioned, but this may explain some other unexplained disappearances of Foundation officials. Fifthism is an enigma by design, but as we learn more and more about it, we can begin to form a picture through all the similar concepts building on top of one another. This SCP links a lot with SCP-1425, Star Signals, and we learned a couple of things about it. One is that the Fifth Church does not quite have a firm grasp on how their own anomalies work, and according to John, Star Signals didn't work the way it was supposed to. Secondly, the end goal of this infection, and presumably what Star Signals was supposed to do, was erase people from this existence. I speculated earlier that this process was sending people somewhere, but that certainly doesn't have to be the case. A lot of SCP-2456 texts mention a deity of some sort, a supreme being or king, and it could be that this process is feeding it somehow, much like sacrifices to the Vorhole feed an entity. Many speculate that SCP-3125, the entity discussed in my anti-memetics video that erases anyone who learns about it from existence, is in fact the deity worshipped by Fifthus. If that is true, the connection with the Gamma instances of SCP-2456 is pretty clear. The point is, Fifthism isn't just perpetually wacky for the sake of being wacky, and the group is working towards a singular goal, however alien and mysterious it might be. SCP-001 05-13. The O5 Council is the leading body of the SCP Foundation, a group of 13 individuals tasked with controlling the containment and research of thousands of anomalies across the world. The Council is typically depicted as enigmatic and mysterious, often anomalous themselves, and although they typically differ in their mindsets of how exactly the Foundation should be run, they work together with a common goal. The article we'll be looking at today, though, ponders a situation in which one of the Council stands apart from the other, O513. In fact, he is accused by the rest of the Council of murdering the previous 12 and covering it up. Obviously, there's more to that accusation than meets the eye, and we'll learn that there's something rather special about O513. SCP-001 is, in this case, the entity known as O513, and how this entity came to become part of the O5 Council is still under investigation. It is currently unaware of its containment, which consists of essentially creating a false Foundation site where it lives under constant surveillance alongside the rest of the O5 Council. The entity typically appears as a male human of Latin American descent, but it's still unknown whether this is its true form or some sort of disguise. It became classified as SCP-001 after the Caesar incident, which involved the deaths of all previous O5 members aside from itself, the destruction of the previous Site-01, and the loss of all documentation regarding SCP-001 prior to the Caesar incident. Apparently, SCP-001 caused the incident through manifestation of its anomalous properties, and it's also believed that one of its properties is anti-memetic in nature, since there exists no information about the incident. Currently, the new set of O5 Council members are investigating various aspects of SCP-001 and the Caesar incident to ascertain what exactly is going on. In a conference meeting between the 12 of them, O5-1 brings up the idea that something is off about O5-13, saying that the 12 of them have all been recently inducted onto the Council at about the same time, and that 13 conducted their orientations, rather than their predecessors. When asked about this, O5-13 claimed ignorance, so O5-1 messaged the Administrator, a figure above even the Council. The Administrator responded that the previous 12 O5s did not in fact retire simultaneously, but were instead killed, and the previous Site-01 was destroyed. None of this information is on any records, and there's only one suspect, as 0513 managed to survive all of this. This is the point where they mark him as SCP-001 and start their investigation, with 051 appointed as their archivist, assigned to take a regular supply of nestic drugs to prevent anomalous memory loss and to keep a journal of all info regarding SCP-001. Despite the number of people that worked at Site-01, the investigation proved to not be a simple process, due to the memory gap from the Caesar incident. An interview was conducted over phone with a Foundation employee who transferred to a new department a week after the Caesar incident, likely due to having previously worked at Site-01. 052 conducts the interview, although conceals their identity, and the employee says that they were transferred because of a containment breach that went off at their old site, although they don't remember many details. They also say that the site they worked at was Site 5, which doesn't exist, and suggest that the containment breach likely involves something anti-memetic, since they can't remember much. In another meeting between the 12, they discussed their research into 0513 and his origin to the Foundation. They looked into the 05 personnel dossier, which, although out of date, contained some info about 13. The edit history had been completely erased, so it's possible that it's been tampered with, but it seems that the previous 12 council members held the position that 05 was indeed an anomaly. They had voted unanimously to put him on the council because of his anomalous nature, in fact, explaining that his special connection to the anomalous gives him a unique perspective. No normalcy confirmation meeting was allowed to proceed without his attendance. In an attempt to deduce his anomalous properties, various surveillance tests and observations were conducted on 0513. His appearance stayed the same regardless of the observer, and as far as they could tell, his physical properties were completely within the baseline for a normal human. People interacting with him reported some mild dread and curiosity, but that's simply because he's a member of the 05 Council. When discussing the previous 12 council members, 051 says that he spoke just once with his predecessor, just after his promotion to site director. They mostly discussed details related to the site and his promotion, but the 05 did mention various modifications that had been done to his body to increase his longevity. 05 members living longer lives than normal is not unusual, as they have access to numerous anomalies that could allow for that process. He didn't mention 0513 specifically though, but he also didn't display any sense of unease when speaking of his fellow council members. It's possible that this was before the appointment of the current 0513 though, as it was 9 years ago. Other things discussed in the 05 meeting were modifying the containment procedures for SCP-001 to allow for more stringent monitoring, although the Ethics Committee vetoed this, since they weren't made aware of 0513's status as an SCP. They are now looking into possibly locating the previous Site-01, investigating 0513's possible ties to groups of interest, and other ways of analyzing SCP-001's anomalous properties. Sometime later, they reconvene again, but were informed that this meeting was cut short due to rising tensions, causing a number of the 05 members to leave the meeting. As for the location of the previous Site-01, they couldn't find any record of it in the Foundation database, but they did find an unusual incident that occurred around the same time as the Caesar incident. An earthquake measuring 6.6 on the Richter scale originated from an uninhabited island off the coast of Greenland, stronger than would be expected for the area. Aerial surveillance revealed the presence of a nearly completely destroyed Foundation facility, and the area emitted radiation at levels similar to that of nuclear fallout sites. It's the belief, then, that the former Site-01 had detonated its on-site nuclear warhead during the Caesar incident. A team of 4 agents were sent in to check out the wreckage, but they were approached by GOC representatives upon landing, demanding that they vacate the premises. The only 05 member that was contacted about the GOC being present in the area was 0513. Since it seems that the GOC are also involved with this cover-up, some of the O5s spoke with multiple groups of interest to ascertain their description of O513. Both the Mana Charitable Foundation and MC&D describe him as an unremarkable male of Latin American descent, with MC&D mentioning that they possess a way to get some additional information. The GOC and the UIU describe O513 as a short woman of Asian descent with an ornate walking stick, but these descriptions are consistent with the O5 information security policy, designed to mislead outsiders. As part of their investigation, some of the O5s performed an exchange with Marshall, Carter, and Dark for information, and O51 asks for some clarification on what exactly was exchanged. A couple of them wonder why anything was exchanged at all, since the Foundation has multiple spies embedded in the group. O57 reveals that, in exchange for some info about O513, she gave MC&D some info about the rest of the Council. This is what causes tension to rise, as info about the Council is kept extremely guarded. The meeting ends, and shortly later, O57 distributes a summary of what exactly she told MC&D. Rather than giving info about the current Council members, she traded info from the out-of-date O5 personnel dossier, which MC&D accepted because they were not aware of the previous 12 being replaced. In exchange, they received some info about where to find some more details about O513. In the next meeting, they start with discussing some new results from continued interviews with the survivors of the Caesar incident, the ones that don't ever remember working at Site-01. None of their extensive interview techniques reveal any new information, so it's not likely that they are faking not remembering. But they did find identical scars on all of their necks, matching the spot where the Foundation injects amnestics. Although the Foundation administers amnestics to make people forget things rather liberally, none of their records indicate a history of amnestic administration. They also checked out members of MTF Red Right Hand, the O5 Council's personal task force, and the entire squad also had the same scars, even though the Council very rarely wipes them. What's more perplexing is that the Foundation stopped using amnestic injections around 10 years ago, and the records for amnestic supplies didn't show any variations after the Caesar incident. A group that does still use injections, though, is the GOC. First, though, following up on the info gained from the deal with MC&D, the Council sends a member of the Red Right Hand to meet with a person of interest, who apparently holds some more information. The person had met with O513 on the same day as the Caesar incident, and although O513 had shown up alone, he didn't leave alone. The person believes that a number of individuals from the FBI's UIU division showed up and left with him, and apparently this surprised both this person and O513. Although that's not a whole lot of info, it does seem that multiple groups are quite interested in O513, and seem to know more about him than even the current O5 Council. The Council meets again, discussing the results of continued testing to determine O513's anomalous properties. It turns out that they really have nothing to go on, as every one of their tests failed to produce notable results. This leads to one of two possibilities: that O513 is some sort of deity that can bypass or otherwise avoid showing up on any of the Foundation's tests, or he's not anomalous. They decide to skip over the first possibility for now, as there isn't much they could do about that, and focus on the second one. They suggest that he's possibly an inside agent for another group of interest, such as the Chaos Insurgency, the Serpent's Hand, the Fifth Church, the GOC, or even the UIU. The problem, though, is that it seems that the nuclear warhead at Site-01 was apparently detonated at the same time that O513 was meeting with the person of interest from before, possibly meaning that O513 detonated it remotely, which should be impossible. This implies that he had assistance from inside the site, possibly from the Ethics Committee or the Administrator. The ethics committee were the ones that prevented the council from installing additional surveillance devices to observe O513 in privacy, and it seems that not even the council can overrule them. One of them suggests just giving him a physical to determine if he truly is a normal human, but if they're wrong and he actually is some sort of god, he'll just wipe them all out, like the last council. O51 plans to consider speaking to O513 about all of this, but only if he's certain it won't result in another Caesar incident.
There's a bit of a... Here, hold on.
We're then provided a look at O513's private messages, one of which is from the administrator.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a different live stream today. So I was gonna do it over the weekend, but I basically just spent a ton of time prepping things, like organizing all these files and a bunch of boring stuff, so I didn't want to live stream it. So I got a little burnt out on music, so I decided I'll just, play around with Blender for a bit. So I'm still working on this little project of mine, but yeah, I mean, basically what I'm doing here is I'm just recreating these stages, like these images in 3D, and then potentially use it in this big video I'm working on. But yeah, pretty much just gonna, like, the whole idea of this stream is I'm not gonna talk much. I mean, unless you have questions, of course I'll talk, but the basic idea was I was just gonna, shut my mouth, turn off my brain, listen to these spooky SCP stories, and yeah, just go at it. So if you have any questions, or if you want to chit chat, I'm all good with that. But yeah, I'm pretty much just gonna keep doing what I'm doing.
One accuses them of trying to kill him through poisoning his coffee, and it's clear that tensions are high among the group. O51 says that they have lost sight of their goal of containment, and that they've grown soft. Half of them are under someone else's thumb, and the other half should probably be in containment themselves due to their anomalous natures. O510 learned how to perform magic from the Wanderer's library, and they need to take an entire cocktail of drugs just to remember that O58 even exists. Going back to the topic of poison, O510 says that maybe it was O513 since he's not even here. O51, however, purposefully sent him to meet the individual known as Nobody, so that he wouldn't be here for this. He's the only person on the council that O51 trusts, because he's normal. They plucked him off the street and just started asking him if he thought certain things were weird.
Yeah, man, like,
says that there's only one thing left
this little experiment taught me a lot about Caustic. Like, it really sucks. I spent, like, I don't want to admit it, but I spent quite a bit of time just importing MIDIs and checking them to make sure, like, they were all right. So, like, yeah, I need a break from music, man, which is kind of why it's nice that I can just open up Blender, and just not think too hard and not listen to anything, you know what I mean? It's a nice break, so I think I'm gonna break up the streams, like, some I'll do music, some I'll just do, like, what I'm doing here. I'll show you some. I'll show you a few other of the.
Key is their outside perspective.
I'll show you the other stages that I did. Sorry, I can't even think right now.
This is why it was said that no meeting of normalcy confirmation.
So, like, on the left here is the original image. On the right is the 3D creation I made. So
the rest of the council can easily.
It's kind of fun.
Like, it's what exactly is
nice and relaxing. Turn off my brain to this, but
I suppose
I'll show you something cool because I don't know. I guess
doesn't learn that
I just want to show you something. So
blew all
let me just let me put this down on pause because it's talking over me. I'm talking over him, but yeah. So this camera thing, right? So I'm gonna go through all these files and set up the camera properly so I can do like a proper render. Because right now that's what it would look like without these. But I learned that you could move the camera around. Let me just put it in this mode. You can move the camera around like it's like an FPS game, right? Kind of fun, kind of confusing. So I took it one step further. I'm just gonna put it in rendered mode, turn that off. I took it one step further. And wow, that looks dope in 3D. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. But what was I saying? So, long story short, instead of doing the FPS thing with mouse and keyboard, I'm gonna do it with a controller. let me just back out of this view. And I messed up because I fell. Let me just try that one more time. Third time's a charm. Yeah, so basically I can control the camera, like the movement, with my controller. And it's like I can physically walk around like the scene that I'm making. So before I get back to blending, I'll just show you one quick thing that I figured out the other day, which is kind of fun, to be honest. So if I well, this is before I organized everything. Okay, let me just do it this way. If I turn off these lights, okay, no lights, and I take the camera, just bear with me a second here. I'm basically just resetting my camera, okay. Bring it here, and then, yeah. So like what you're seeing, this 3D object, is when I press the numpad 0 button, I basically come here and, yeah. I'm just resetting it, just give me a second here. So what I'm saying is, if I add in a light source, like a cone, or you know what, I should have, just one sec, I'm really bad at this. Yeah, okay, so they're both at the origin point. So what I'm saying is, if I take this spotlight, and I stick it to the camera, known as parenting it, okay, so when I move the camera, I move the light around, okay, so, so I will, I really don't need to do this with the key, like I don't need to set the camera, I can physically move it, but I'm just setting it up so, so I can show you something. So if I go to my camera, I go to that spotlight, and it's kind of weak, you can't really see anything right now. But I'll just increase the brightness ever so slightly. And I can make it a little bit, what do you call it? I can change like the cone of the light, like how much it'll show. Oh, what am I saying? This thing, there we go. I can fuzz out those edges so it looks like a real flashlight. Okay. Check this out. Let me just give myself a little bit more space so I can walk around without falling into the void. So, oh man, I'm really bad at this. I got it okay, there we go. So check this out. Oh, it's kind of zoomed in. I'm really ruining this whole effect. But yeah, check this out. I'm in 3D, I'm in the scene, I'm controlling with a controller. And I basically stuck a spotlight to my camera. I can just turn up the brightness just a little bit more on it. Where is it? Yeah, something like that. And then just zoom in. Terrible explanation. Yeah, like exactly. I can make like this weird like spooky horror thing. And like this is completely unintentional. Like I don't know, it's just something I figured out. And like the cool thing about this is like I can record my movements and like how I'm moving the camera around, and then I can smooth out those keyframes. So when I play it back, it's literally just like, you know, I'm just like coming across this weird like, I don't know, it's just kind of like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like I figured out how to turn Blender into like a horror game when really it's not a horror game, like at all. You see what I mean? It's like, but anyway, I don't want to waste too much time on that. I'll just show you the other scenes that I've been working on. So that's Cutman stage. I'll show you Bomb Man stage. So like, basic idea of how this works is I'll take a shape. And yeah, that's kind of a mess to look at. But essentially it's like, how do I explain it? So I take this shape, this geometry, and I lay it out flat over an image, and then I basically just line it up so it it's texture mapping. Anyway, let me just show you. I'm really terrible at explaining these concepts, but Yeah, basically this is a like a side-by-side view. So that's the original, like from the games. It does have a sort of learning curve to it, but like honestly, it's not that difficult to learn. Like I know it looks like a whole lot on screen, all these commands and buttons, and like even that thing I just showed you, like all that seems like way too much to handle. But honestly, it's like if you just take your time with it, it all becomes so natural to you. But can you use these assets in a side screen? Yeah, exactly. So if you look at this stage, like so if I can explain this, these are all in the background, like in the game, like in the actual, like in the original game. But what I decided was like I'll put some of these in the foreground and background to kind of give it depth. So what you're seeing here, so like right now this is perspective view, like how you and I would see it in real life. When I hit this number one on the numpad, I'm looking at this image like in an orthographic view, which is like head on, how you'd see it on paper. So I like to play around in both kinds of views, but oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. But yeah, so I'm just setting up the scenes. Like I'll do a final render and everything much later, but it's just a ton of fun, man. Like you just set up the scene, you can play with the lights and yeah, like I think this is one of the better ones I did just because of how intricate like these objects look, right? I mean, it looks cool because, you know, it's what the original art was. Like I don't know, I couldn't come up with these kind of designs even if I wanted to. So that was Bomb Man stage, and then oh, that's the one I'm working on, Fireman. Electman, it's kind of bland in my opinion, just because there's not a whole lot like going on this. But same idea with like Cutman, right? So you'd have like a. Actually, I could probably show it to you better like this. Just grab this controller, and walk around. I can also fly around too, but like, you know, like hover up, hover down, speed up, slow down. So it's really cool, man. Like I can do like some weird cinema. Oh, hold on, sorry. I can do like really cool cinematic stuff too. Like if I were to record this, and then have it like slowly pan out. You know what I mean? So like it's so much more intuitive to do this camera stuff with like a controller. But yeah, like so. Let me go back to that side-by-side view. That'd probably be easier to see. So on the left-hand side of the screen, again, same thing. It's how the original... Oh my god. This is exactly how it appears in the game, and this is how I modeled it, so... I did take some liberties here, so like if I hit it like that, it pretty much looks like how it would in the game, but... Obviously, you don't see the top part of this geometry in the game. You know what I mean? So... So yeah, I basically just I don't know. It's a whole. It's weird. It's hard to explain, but honestly, it's just so much fun to like to just not think of anything. You literally like I'll show you. So if I go to that fireman stage, right? So what I was doing before I dropped in was I was doing this section over here, this black part. So I have no idea what this thing is, but I was debating whether or not making it 3D, kind of like I did with those towers, like in that Electman stage, but I'll do it both ways. So the first way I'll show you is pretty easy. So if I look into solid view, let me just turn on this one setting here. So yeah, if I go to this solid view. Now it should be a little bit easier to see what like all the geometry, right? So yeah, so I basically honestly a highlight reel of some of your favorite creations with the dynamic camera panning, zooming in. Yeah, that's that's kind of like what the plan is. So once I do the remixes, like similar to that Minecraft video I did, where I had like the objects animated and, you know, like lighting up to the music or something. I kind of had a similar idea, except for like all these Megaman remixes, right? So my idea is I'll do the remix and basically, I don't know, showcase this like as I was panning around, or animate things with it. I didn't really think it through just yet, but I kind of just want to build out the framework for all of this. So yeah, like I was saying, I'll do this two ways. So if I go to solid view, which is just like the basic geometry that I've been doing, I tweaked a few settings just so it's a little bit easier to read. But yeah, so if I take this piece here, which corresponds to this black piece, then what I'll do is like again, like without scripting, without actually, I don't know, just off the top of my head I'm trying to explain. But Blender has two modes, okay? Object mode, which is like the geometry that I'm like creating and moving around, and edit mode. If I hit tab, I come into edit mode. And what edit mode lets me do is I can basically just play around with all of this geometry, right? I can stretch it, I can manipulate it in like weird ways, and yeah, without getting too technical. So what I'm saying is yeah, no, it's honestly, this little project of mine just like kind of keeps me focused, right? Kind of lets me like look forward to something. But yeah, like I'm saying, so I'll take all this geometry, that one piece, I'll hit U, unwrap it, so it'll, yeah, so if I can explain it better, it's like, I'll show you on different geometry. So what's a good piece? This piece is good to explain. This platform. So if you'll notice here, when I click this face, it highlights in orange, right? And this has a corresponding I don't know, a UV coordinate. So, and then if I click this top piece, it's something else up here, and if I click the side piece, it's something else, right? So what I'm doing here on this geometry, I like to stick in solid view just because it's a little bit easier to see sometimes. But yeah, so I come onto this piece, like only this piece I'm selecting right now, hit tab, and then I will click on this face. And what I want to do now is line up these coordinates, these 4 points, or this face, if you can call it that. I want to line it up with this box, like that black box. So I can move it over, I can scale it, I can shift these nodes around, like I can do it, or I can't do it. I can do it like that, but I like to stick with constraints, so like I can only move it in this axis, or I can only move it like up and down. Yeah, without getting too technical and boring, basically all I'm doing is I take this face, I bring out its UV coordinates, and then I just line it up to the part of the image that I want displayed in the geometry. So if you look here, I'll just turn off all these extras. Just pay attention to this face as I'm moving this like the UV map thing. The nodes, I don't know what you call them. So what I'll do is I'll just line it up on the left. Like basically I just go from line up on the left, line up on the top, the right, the bottom, then just adjust it as needed. So move this up. And again, it's like I could swing it out freely however I want, but I like working with these like up and down constraints just because it's a little bit easier to work with. So you can edit individual objects or textures and then manipulate them as single or in a group function. Yeah, basically. So like all of these are just separate. Oh, I didn't have the. All of these are just separate objects, right? And so what I'm doing with each object is I basically just try to line it up, like, so if I go to this view, I'll take the geometry first, I'll block it out so it lines up relatively the same with whatever I'm lining it up with. And then I go into the edit mode, right? And then I click that face, and so you can see it doesn't have to be exact, I mean it's the same texture, but I basically took this and I lined it up with the section I wanted it to represent. So if I go somewhere else, you can see that the texture starts to change. If I turn off those overlays, you can see it better. So just pay attention to that piece, right? The more I move this, the more different it becomes. So if I wanted to represent that little Pokeball thing, then I could just say, yeah, I mean it looks horrible. Like it looks really, really bad, but that's basically what I'm doing here, man. Like, it's pretty straightforward, to be honest. Like, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort, or I mean, it kind of does, but once you get into the workflow, I mean, it's a lot of fun, to be honest. So I will fix this texture really quick. And just like that, it's pretty much done. So I mean, I could try and make that 3D. I mean, I may as well. I mean, like, what's the big deal? It's not gonna make a difference. But yeah. What am I gonna? I don't even know what I want to say anymore. Just want to take a quick peek in 3D just to see how it. This is cool, isn't it? I just want to see how it would look. Okay. So my idea is these ladders here need to be brought out a little bit more. That lava could probably be brought out a lot more. So yeah, we just try and hover over at a different angle and check. Yeah, so I have no idea like what this stage is supposed to represent, but there's like cages and like I'll admit working with the classic Mega Man games is kind of weird just because like I have no idea what I'm looking at, but in terms of geometry, all it is really just stretch them out at different lengths just so the shadows catch differently on them. But yeah, so I think the ladders need to be fixed, and before I do that, I'm gonna try and make this thing 3D. So yeah, let's figure this out. Okay, I mean, you see what I mean. Like, you get what I mean. Like, why would I just take that face, hit G to grab it, and then use my faintly see that green line. If I didn't do that, it'd be kind of hard to pull and move. But basically, I'm just locking it to one axis that I want to move in, and it kind of makes it a little bit easier. So bring that out maybe. And like, here's the thing. So like, the more I stretch these textures, like on the front it looks fine, but you'll notice on the side it gets really ugly. So I have to kind of retexture it, but yeah, not a big deal right now. So what do I want to do? Is that, yeah, that is an object. So because these are both the same objects, I'll do it in a solid view just so it's easier. Because these are both the same object, I'll select them both at the same time and just bring them out a little bit. So yeah, like, I mean, I don't know if you can really tell, but like all these platforms are jutting out at the exact same distance just because I like copy them, right? So I like how the surfaces that Mega Man interacts with are much more imposed into the z-axis. Also, while the object maps in certain dimensions snap in certain dimensions. Oh, so there's settings for that. The snap question you're asking. So what I am doing right now, it's a little bit too messy to look at. So it's easier to explain if let me just turn off these lights so we can see my grid behind it. So if I just solo this out. So what I'm doing right now, this is my little snap function, okay? If I hold control, like, so if I move it, it just moves around. If I hold this middle click, it constrains it, right? But if I hold control, you'll notice it moves in those increments, and those increments are according to the grid, like the grid that it's based on. So if I zoom in more, I can, so you'll see, if I zoom in more, then I can move it more on the, well, I don't know, more precisely. But yeah, like you're saying, you can, so if I come out here, take that face for example, right? I want to bring it down. So I can snap it to this geometry. So if I were to go to face, and I'm not exactly sure about these settings, but I'll just turn it on so I don't have to hold control. So if I want to bring this down, yeah, that is it's quite horrible. Try this setting. Yeah, look, I'm doing a bad job at explaining this, but yes, like, you can determine if you want this bottom piece to, okay, let me just turn that off. if I wanted it to like snap right onto that surface, I could do that. I'm just struggling to do that. So to answer your question, yes, yes you can. And yeah, I mean 3D modeling, it looks complicated with all this like wireframe and like all this weird stuff I'm doing, but honestly, man, like if you get into it, if you just get into like a nice workflow, it all becomes so natural and just so like fun to play with. So yeah, like I was saying, I'm gonna attempt to make this guy in 3D. So I'm gonna start by adding in a new mesh, and that new mesh will be a UV sphere, or you know, like a sphere. Now you'll notice when I added it, it came to where this 3D cursor was. So if I move it over here, just say for example, and I add in a cube, it'll be there. So a smart thing to do actually, instead of having it spawn all the way down here, I could zoom into this thing, click it, and then I'll turn on wireframe mode just so I can see it better. And I'll just line up this cube, or not a cube, the sphere. Line up that sphere with that little object, and it's not exactly in the center, which is okay. I mean, nobody's really gonna complain, are they? And so if I look at this image, it looks like it's, yeah, like I don't know if those are just extra spheres up and down, or yeah, honestly, it's kind of hard to tell what that is. Like, I imagine if I just duplicated this sphere, moved it up, and shrunk it down, it might work. I mean, maybe. Let's see. So to get that same distance from top and bottom, actually, this is kind of interesting. So I'll take this object. It's highlighted right now. We'll call it, well, it's just the top sphere. Okay, we have the top sphere. And I'll come and add a modifier to it, and I'll add a mirror modifier. But I will specify to it that I want to mirror off of this object. So so you can see if I move it right now, it's mirroring on that red x-axis. So I don't want that. I want it on the z-axis? I don't know. Let me check. Yeah. Okay, I was right. I do want it on the z-axis. So what I'm saying is, actually looks kind of cool. This is my original object. I'm saying we're going to use this big object as the mirror, and we're going to mirror on this up and down axis, I guess, the blue z-axis. So if I were to do it, yeah, so anyway, yeah, it works. So I don't want to get I don't want to get like all technical on you about this, especially when you're like, I have no idea what he's talking about. Anyway, so I have that little object now, okay? So again, this looks like a cylinder, I would say. I mean, it might just be a square, actually. You know what? I'll make it a cylinder because this ball thing is a cylinder too. So keeping my cursor here, that 3D cursor, or actually what I could do is I'll move it intentionally. I'll move it away. I can click this sphere, Shift S, and I can say cursor to active. So now it's at the dead center of that sphere, which is what I want, right? Because now I'm going to add that tube. So, Shift A, mesh, cylinder. Now it doesn't look like a cylinder because it's not facing the right way, but I will just rotate it 90 degrees. I'll shrink it down. And it kind of helps to look in wireframe mode just to see it better sometimes. And I'll scale it in the x-axis now, that red x-axis. You appreciate the explanation. Oh, there's a lot to learn. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there's quite a bit to learn, and like it does take a bit of time. But like, honestly, the results speak for themselves, man. If you can, like, it doesn't even have to be Megaman stuff. It could be like whatever you're interested in. Like, for example, your logo or whatever, right? I don't know if you're interested in that, but you could literally recreate your logo, like for your YouTube channel, in 3D, and then, you know, animate it. And I guess it works for me because mine is kind of like simple and geometric, but I'm more than sure that you could do yours as well. So yeah, I'm gonna bring this tube down just a little bit. Yeah, that should be perfect. So I'll go to wireframe mode, and so yeah, how can I explain this? So if I don't have this X-ray part on, so I'll go to solid mode. So if I were to select these faces, so like here's what I'm doing. Just without wasting too much time here, I'd box select that end piece of the tube, and then I basically just stretch it out just like that. And the reason I have to have that X-ray mode on is because if I try to do that, it only, you can see here, like back to solid view, it didn't select the other half of that tube. So if I were to stretch it out, like if I were to stretch it, it just looks yeah, it looks all, actually that looks kind of cool. But basically what I'm saying is, like, I only selected half of that tube, whereas if I were to put it on X-ray mode and do that same process, it selects all of it. So it's yeah, it's a TED talk to explain X-ray mode. So yeah, take the tube, take that end piece, and then just stretch it out. And oh, now that I'm thinking, I'm like, this isn't centered now. Okay, you know what? I'll just make a quick decision here. I will bring it up just a little bit. Oh, and I gotta turn my snap mode back to increment, otherwise it won't let me do that grid snapping thing. That should be fine. I'm not gonna waste too much time on this. Just turn off this heater. So yeah, what was I doing? Complicated stuff. So let's start with that red line, because that just seems a lot easier to make. So I'll take this object, go into edit mode. Oh, before I do anything, sorry, because I was stretching and squishing it, it's a good thing to apply the scale, it's called. So go Control A, apply. You know, I just go all transforms because it's just easier. And yeah, so that origin to geometry. So I should explain that too, I guess, while I'm explaining everything. If I rotate this, if I rotate it, you see it's kind of like that dotted line's like all the way down here at the bottom, right? It's rotating kind of weird. So that's because I basically moved the geometry around without resetting it. Anyway, just right click, origin to geometry. Now it rotates properly. So that's why you're able to select directly, corresponds with what you can see in non-wireframe. Yeah, exactly. So that X-ray wireframe stuff just lets me like if I want to take yeah, I'm really bad at explaining this, but yeah, it basically just, it makes it so you don't have to like if I want to select this object, right? If I want to select that face and that back one and then move them together, or like however yeah, it basically, because if you're dealing with solid mode, then you basically like, here's a good example. So if I want that piece, it only selected the front piece, right? So if I go back to I'm in wireframe. If I turn on X-ray mode and I want to, so basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that face and I'm just stretching it out. So there's three ways I can do that. The first way is the what's it called? A Vertices mode, right? So this mode. So I can select each individual vertice and move them around as I want to. Or I can select those lines in between the vertices, known as edges. So if I select if I select all four of these edges, it becomes a face. So I can choose, I want to select either the vertices, so two vertices equals, what do you call it, an edge. And then, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, but basically I just want to take this face and stretch it out. So what I like to do is I'll stay in vertice mode, and I know this is like so if I do that, you can kind of see how it's working, right? So if I turn off X-ray mode and I try to do that, oh, I guess it works, but depending on the angle that I'm looking at it works. But yeah, because I like working in this flat orthographic view, if I were to try and do that, it only selects those two, like the front two. If I turn on X-ray mode, now it selects all four of them, which equals that face, which gives me an even stretch thing. So yeah. Quite a lengthy explanation for something that could probably be summed up in like less than a minute, but yeah, back to what I was doing. And again, if you have questions, I mean, feel free to ask, right? I mean, that's what I'm here for. So what I'm gonna do, what I'm finally gonna do is take this tube and I'm gonna match it to this texture. So how do I do that? I select the object, tab into edit mode, select all the faces which are highlighted here, and I'll hit U Smart UV Project, and what I'll do is scale to bound. So basically what it's doing is just taking all those faces, and it's, okay, maybe I won't do that. I did something weird, but that's okay. Yeah, whatever, I'll just do scale to bounds, it doesn't matter. So if I go into face select, you'll see like it's oh, that's why. I mean, I guess. Oh, I guess it's an open net. No, it has faces. Okay, so let me get out of X-ray mode really quick. So you'll see when I select like a face or like an individual face or a series of faces, it corresponds to here on the you know, high school students are like, why do I need to learn geometry? I'm never gonna actually use that. Oh, trust me, man. Like you know what I've come to realize about this? It's like a technical kind of art. Like there's a lot of terminology, you know, there's a lot of theory behind what you're doing, but honestly, it just kind of works out. Like it's a nice balance between like the creative stuff and the technical stuff, in my opinion. But yeah, so the little explanation I'm giving is each face corresponds to one of these, let's call them vertice faces. So if I select those ends here, you can see they're kind of squished and down here. So anyway, what I'm gonna do is I will go back to that X-ray mode. I'll take all those faces like that, but I'm gonna deselect these two the two end parts of that the tube or cylinder, I guess would be called. So to do that easily, actually, what I can do is I'll select everything, hold shift and click it again to unselect it. So I'm unselecting those two ends. Okay, I'll just bring everything back so we can see it. And now, let me just turn off these helpers so you can... Oh no, you know what? You know why it's not going to work? I didn't assign a material to this. That's why it appears like that white color. So before I do anything, I'll go back to object mode so I can select, you know, oh, I got to turn on these. Okay, I'll go back to object mode. And I could either go into the shading tab up here, or I could just come down here. It doesn't really make a difference, but actually it does make a difference. So with this object still selected, I'll come here, make a new material. Okay, so I can change, oh, it's not rendered. Yeah. So, you know, I can change the base color of it. You know, I can change it to whatever I want. I can change it to that red color. But instead of doing that, I found that it's easier to just take the image texture. So this is basically that the image here that you've been seeing me play around with. So I'm saying you take that image and you use that as your color. And then just, yeah, you can ignore all of this. Like, it looks confusing. It's really complicated, but it's not too complicated. All I'm saying is use the UV mapping data, like that, like this data, and represent it on the geometry. So now if I turn off that the overlay, you can see it better. So yeah, just focus on this cube, or not cube, the cylinder here. So I gotta make sure it's selected. Yeah, okay. And I'll just deselect the ends again. You can see how handy it is to use X-ray mode, though. I mean, I can click it through what I'm seeing. Anyway, blah blah blah. Let's take this texture UV thing. Let's rotate it, scale it down, and then just line it up over this this red texture line thing. It's I don't know, I don't know what it is, to be honest. But yeah, so I'm struggling right now to scale properly because my mouse cursor is way too close to this UV coordinates. So a good trick is actually to just move your mouse out more, and you have much more control over how you want to scale it. So essentially what I'm going to do is just take this texture, because this and this are the same. So I'll take this and I will line them up as best I can. It doesn't have to be exact. I mean, it's one flat color, so I really don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. So again, if I look at this now, if I look at this texture, you can see it's already starting to take on that textured pixel look. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. If I move it here, it's, you know, it's weird. So yeah. Why isn't this not? Oh, okay. So here's a cool thing to notice, that I can't select these because I'm in face select mode, and these little dots are known as vertices. So I'll actually come into vertice mode, and now I can grab them. So I'm just gonna stretch it over to the end. So like, here's how I would describe it. You have geometry, right? So imagine it's like your face, like the geometry, and you want to put on a mask, right? So what I'm doing with this geometry is I'm like stretching this color, like this mask, over top of it. It's kind of a bad example. I mean, like, it's probably better to describe it in like in the other geometries that I've done here. Like that. So like that would be your mask, right? I could change how that mask looks if I move that texture around those coordinates. So like, does it kind of make sense? It's like I have that one face of the geometry, and I'm putting on a mask, and it's like, what does that mask look like? And that's entirely up to me, depending on where I move these UV coordinates. So it's a really handy tool, like a technique. It's honestly just like, once you get into the workflow of it, it's not even hard to do. Like, it's actually kind of relaxing. And like, the only thing I kind of struggle with is coming up with geometry. Like, lucky for me, all these classic games are pretty much just rectangles and squares, except for this, whatever that guy is. Like, I don't know, but I'm gonna create in 3D, so I'll explain it some more. Yeah, being able to apply existing textures to different faces seems like a real game changer once you get used to it. Exactly. Like, what I'm trying to do design-wise is I'm trying to keep at least the platforms the same thickness between all the different files that I'm going to do, like the different stages. So it honestly helps so much. It's like the geometry is pretty much already there. I just unwrap it, take a new image over into the left-hand side. So like, if I were to do like Cutman stage. And what geometry am I even moving here? Yeah, so I don't want to explain it. It's a little bit complicated, but just because I'm changing this does not change what this was mapped to. This image is actually mapped all the way back here. That image, right? So if I change that to Cutman, then yeah, like, these all share the same data properties, so they'll all try and like so yeah, that same coordinate. It's hard to explain. You can see it lines up with this Cutman image, so it's a bit technical. Like, don't get me wrong, it is. Yeah, it's. Well, I'm glad the way I explained it makes sense, because honestly, to me, I sound like an idiot trying to explain all of this. But yeah, let's just continue with the little process. So I will create another material. I think I can use the same materials, but it doesn't make a difference to me. I'm not going for efficiency right now. I'm literally just doing what I can to make these things. So you can see, like, there's that image, right? That image we've been playing with. It's all mapped around this sphere. So what I'll do is, there's a little shortcut, Control-T. Like, it's a little add-on that's, honestly, it's a free add-on that you can enable. So I would highly recommend using it. But anyway, I'll take the UV data of this geometry and I'll apply the fireman image to it. And then what I can do now in the UV editing is I can come to the sphere. So you can see, like, all of this sphere has been mapped out over the image. So I want to change that. I don't like that. So I will go, I'll highlight all the faces, select them all, hit U, smart UV project, scale to bound. So it's, that is kind of messed up. That's not what it looked like before. Okay, here's another thing I will do. I'm gonna isolate this object just so it's a lot easier to see. Oh, you know what? I think it's because I was stretching and squishing. I didn't apply my scale. So Control A, all transforms, and it should work now if I smart scale to bounds. It's all right. You know what I'll do instead of struggling to figure this out? Because I only have to look at the front face of this object anyway, right? So I'll just take all those faces, and I'll now, like, so like only half of those faces have been selected. And now I'll do the smart UV project. And it still gives me this weird... Oh, you know what I could do, actually? Like, because this is giving me weird geometry, so what I will do... I will rotate this by 90 degrees. So now when I'm looking at it head on, and then I do this... This is just great. I don't even know what's going on. Well, I kind of do and I kind of don't, but... this just makes it even more difficult for me. How did I... What I'm trying to do, like, basically, if I can explain myself, is I'm trying to just take... Yeah, like that. So that little sphere corresponds to that little sphere. So if I... Okay, let's see. Yeah, this just gets, I don't know, it's kind of technical, kind of weird to explain, but... Let's take that out. Yeah, I really picked a great way to demonstrate this. I could have just left that in as a background element and it probably would have been fine, but for some reason I just had to do this. So yeah, let me just save this and I'll try and explain better what I'm struggling with here. So if I go back to the it was Bomb Man. So if I go to these balls, I guess you'd call them. You'll notice here, so if I select just that sphere, right? That whole globe was selected, yet look at these UVs, they're all like circular, so it's really easy for me to just to map it, you get what I mean? Like if I go here, if I expand that texture, you see how that image just gets smaller and smaller? So for some reason it's not working for me when I'm doing, actually let me just check something. Yeah, it was like the same settings I did, so why would it... Yeah, this is really strange. I don't know what's going on, but I'm just gonna work through it and see if I can figure it out. This might be boring, and yeah, I mean... I really don't know what to say. It is boring to watch, to be honest. Like, I have an idea of what can work for this, it's just not working in my favor right now. Oh, what if I did this? So if I go sphere projection, did that work? No, yes, let's find out. If I do this, sphere project, no, didn't work. Cylinder? No. Cube? Oh, wait. Project from view. Yes, there we go. Perfect. So, because I'm looking at it head on, like in that orthographic paper mode, what I'm saying is rather than mapping it all weird, you map it the exact, like basically how I'm looking at it. Yo, this is what I want. Okay. Take off. I'm glad I figured it out. So I'll just take the center point and I'll shrink it down. And let me just turn off that that overlay so you can kind of see it here now. Oh, that looks so bad. I mean, I guess it's because it's I guess it's because this is you know, like a pixelated sphere and I'm using like an actual sphere, so maybe if I use some cube, like if I did make a cube in that shape, it'd probably match better, but I'm gonna be lazy and just do it as is. I mean, it doesn't look that bad. I mean, if I turn off the lights, you can't even see how... It looks good from a distance at a certain angle, but it's definitely not boring. I like seeing the troubleshooting in real time. It's a realistic workflow, and bingo. Yeah, I do it exactly. Like, that's what I like about Blender. I mean, usually I'd have like music playing or something, right? I'd be a little bit more focused, but like that's the idea, is like you're in this state of workflow and then like all of a sudden something trips you up and you have to come to, you know, like come up with a solution, maybe do a bit of Googling, but I mean, look at the results. I can't complain. Maybe I can bring that out a bit more though. So I actually, okay, before I get ahead of myself, let me just color in these spheres. And okay, here's the thing. So it'd be kind of a wasted UV map them like I've been doing because it's just a single color. So if I can get away with this, then let me turn those overlays back on. So I'll take this sphere and I'll do a new color to it. So again, just like before, oh nice, there's shared too. Oh, that's bad. I mean, let me just figure something out here. I'll take this eyedropper and I will try and it works. Perfect. Okay. So instead of just doing that texturing stuff, I basically just said like, here's the color I want it to be. And I took a little eyedropper and I'm like, I want it to be the exact same color as what I'm seeing on screen. So that makes my life easier. So right now these objects are joined together. So what I'll do is I'll go into edit mode. I'll highlight the bottom one by tapping L. I'll tap P and I will say separated by selection. Okay, so now that becomes its own object. And because it's its own object, I can change the color on it too. So if I delete the color, you know, it has no color. So, you know, do the same thing. New color. You can play around with it. Or you can take the eyedropper. And just like that, it's it's good. So what I'm going to do is just bring it out a little bit just so we see like the full geometry of all this. And one cool thing I can show you, this has to do with that light trick I showed you with the camera, the parenting. So I want this to move, like right now if I move it, you know, it just, well, let me do one quick thing. Origin to geometry, so it moves accordingly, like, you know, it moves properly. So anyway, what I want to do is when I move this one object, the other three move as well. So I will, oh, the color picker tool is a godsend. Oh, dude, trust me, I wasn't sure it was gonna work on stream. I was thinking maybe I will have to texture map it, but yeah, like I can get like an accurate color because it's the exact same color that was used in the game. It's so sick. Anyway, so what I'm gonna do is I'll take this object, this object, this object, and I'll select my parent last. Okay, so terminology here is this is the parent, and these are gonna be its children. The children will always follow the parent. Like, I didn't come up with that. That's just the terminology. So, and you can tell the parent is selected last because it has that yellow outline as opposed to the orange one. So if I click that one, that's the last one selected, you know, like blah, blah, blah. That's the, okay. I'll just redo it just so it's a little bit easier to see. And I'll do it in solid mode just so it's even easier to see. Take this, take this, take this, and then select this one last. Control P, set parent to object, but keep the transform. I always do the second option. I'm not sure. I think it just keeps... I'm not sure. It's just how I learned. I mean, like, I think if you do the other options, it doesn't keep the same space or whatever. Anyway, if I move that ball now, I move everything, including that, I don't want to call it a cube. I don't know why. It's a cylinder. So with that being said, I'll go back into material preview. And what I feel like, so what I tried to do is if I hide these, if I just temporarily hide these right now, that was the original way, right? I took this one, what do you call it? I don't even remember. I took this geometry and I mapped that background image to it, so that appeared flat. But then I had the idea of creating it in 3D and then texture mapping it. So what I'll do with this background now is I'll just make it all black because there's no point in having this weird effect. So to do that, so I'm in object mode right now, right? You could tell I'm in object mode because it says up here object mode. I'll click this image or this geometry, tab into it, select all. When really, I mean, I don't have to select all because like nobody's really gonna see like look at the back of this. This is horrendous. That gets mapped over here and like it's obviously incorrect. But hey, I might fix it. I might fix it later. I mean, honestly, I care less at this point. But I just take this face and I'll remap these so it is. So let me just show it to you a little bit clearer. So if you just pay attention to this background here, just watch as I move these bottom pieces, it scrunches up, but if I move them up a little bit, or if I try to, now it's black. So with that being said, which I don't know, I guess I've been saying that a lot, but now I can go to the final rendered view, which is kind of how it would look if I were to render it. And yeah, those lights are still on, okay. Like all these lights. Yeah, I can, I guess I didn't explain it, but I could move around these lights if I wanted to. And, get like different effects and like different conditions and all that, but yeah, what a difference rendering it in 3D made. That's a huge difference. Oh, I mean, it does wonders, man. And like, there's two rendering engines actually in Blender. So right now I'm working with Eevee, which is kind of like, I guess, what a video game engine would be like. Like, it's not real-time shadows and all that. And it's going to look a little bit better, but it might take a bit longer to render. Cycles, which mimics actual, like, light rays, and yeah, it pretty much looks the same, but it looks a little bit more like, how do I explain it? Let's see if I can change these metallic properties of it. Yeah, so I mean, now it's a little bit shinier, it's a little bit more, yeah, it's what I'm doing is kind of weird. It doesn't really do it justice, but basically, like, the way I explain it is cycles is for like photorealistic stuff. Like if you're, I don't know, you have like a glass cube, you have like a spotlight shining through it, and you want like realistic reflections and all that, then you would use cycles to do that. But if you just wanted like Eevee's like a quicker rendering engine, like it's not true ray tracing, but it kind of mimics it. So I kind of like working with Eevee, just, I mean, because it's kind of easy to work with. But yeah, here it is, man. This is a Fireman stage, I guess, done in 3D. I mean, it looks kind of cool. Let's take a look. One thing I'll do, so right now I'm just gonna save this, but what I can do is I can take, let me just kill those lights. Oh. I'll go back. So this is the rendering scene right now. I'll go back to the viewport shading. Viewport shading does not give me those lighting effects, but it does let me see all the textures and all that. Anyway, I'm just going to take all of this and not do that. Set origin to geometry. I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, Control A, all transforms. There we go. So, yeah, that's a good example. So you saw it was all scaling all weird before. Anyway, I don't want to get too technical. I'm just going to scale this up quite a bit for no reason. I'll go back into the shade, the proper viewport. And, what is that, my floor? Yeah. So as you can see, those, like, I scaled everything way, way up. So these lights are actually are not strong enough, or they're too close, to light up the whole scene. So what I will do, So I'll come into this bigger layout. I'm just gonna do something real. Unfortunately, I gotta head to bed. Thanks for streaming and taking the time to explain everything. Yeah, no worries, man. Like, I should actually get to bed pretty soon too. I'll just show you one last thing. Before, like, I guess I don't know if you're sticking around or not, but yeah. I'm just gonna take these lights, move them over, make them really bright. And you know what? I'll just use sun lamps. I'll just set them to 1. This is horrible. Okay, I didn't mean to mess this up so badly, but I'll just use a sun lamp. No big deal. Come into here, grab my controller, and I can walk around in this scene in 3D. Looks kind of bad, and I'm clipping through a bunch of geometry, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of cool, but yeah. I don't want to hold you. I don't know if you're still watching or not. It's not a big deal, but yeah, with that being said, I'm gonna not save this because I messed up a bunch of stuff, but yeah, I guess I'm just gonna end the stream here. I mean, it's pretty late. I'm gonna head out. I've been at this for like 2.5 hours now, but yeah, this is pretty much what to expect. I'll try and stream tomorrow or Wednesday or whatever the schedule may be, but yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna go through and keep doing these levels because this is honestly a lot of fun. I need a break from all that music. But yeah, that's it. I don't want to hold you. I don't want to drag this out for too long. So if you're curious about what I was listening to in the beginning, I think I left a link at the top of the chat, or it might be in the description. Doesn't matter, but yeah, look up SCP, the Exploring Series, because honestly, his channel is the best way to get into it. That is so cool. Navigating a scene you made, really satisfying. Yeah, dude, like, normally I could do it, like, with these FPS controls, but it's kind of awkward with, like, mouse and keyboard, right? I really like this controller thing, man. Like, it really changed it up. I mean, it's not like I basically just clipped through to, like, the top of everything, which is it's not a big deal. Not a game engine. Yeah, man, no worries. Take it easy, EQ. Equalize. I'll see you on the next stream or see you whenever, but yeah, that's gonna do it for me. I'm gonna end the stream, and yeah, thanks for sticking around, man. If any of you are watching or if you zoned out, it doesn't matter, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. I hope to do this again sometime soon, hopefully tomorrow, and if not, the day after, and if not, the day after, and you know how it goes. Alright, I'm gonna end it. Thank you for watching, thank you for sticking around with me, and you know, I'll try and do a better job of explaining as I go, because I feel like there's a lot I want to say, but I struggle to remember it all. Anyway, I'm gonna end it here. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.